Hey, friends, we are live. Thanks for joining me today, Monday, November the 19th. I am blessed to welcome my friend James Walton to the show today. James and I are going to have a very far reaching conversation. We want to touch on a book that he just released recently titled The Christmas Hook. There's so much more to James than just this book, so we're going to get into some of that. James and I, we were talking before we went on the air. James and I met through Twitter. Now, folks that have listened to me for a while, I've made this statement time and time again, probably a dozen or more times in the last couple of years, that I make a lot of contacts through Twitter, and I've had more than a handful of folks that have become friends through just contacting, sending a message, asking a question. James is one of those people. James is a very interesting individual, very interesting man, and his story is very interesting, and I think you're going to like that. James, welcome to the show.
Dr. Mike, thanks so much for having me on, sir. Always an honor. It's been an honor since I met you, and if you don't mind, right off the top, I'd just like to say thank you for the opportunity, and thanks so much for, well, you've been sort of instrumental in me as a man finding my way and having some trust in my faith and really growing spiritually. I mean, I know your title is spiritual advisor over there on the Objective, and the first time I saw it, I didn't understand it. Then here we are, maybe a year or two later, and I've been advised. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, James, thank you. That's very kind of you to say that. Um, James and I found one another, and he invited me on his show, I Am Liberty. So check out iamliberty.com, iamlibertyshow.com, I believe it is. I think
You got
Jared
it.
has it up there. Yeah, there it is. iamlibertyshow.com. Now, this is a podcast and it's a live show. James, when is that live on the Prepper Broadcast Network?
Yeah, you can get the I Am Liberty show live every Wednesday, unless I do a pre-record, which is very rare. But you know, probably about 50 weeks out of the year, I'm live Wednesday nights, and that's a 2-hour block. That's 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we get into a lot on those 2 hours. We've got a live chat room, we've got a live listening audience, and a call-in number, the whole nine. And 2 hours, one set of ads. It's a lot to cover, and we get into it at the I Am Liberty show. And I do appreciate anybody who takes the time. Those who have listened, those who may listen, those who will listen.
Yeah, a lot of great information, folks. Not just on prepping, but really going beyond the freeze dried foods and the ammunition. To really engage people where you live, your neighbors and those in the area that you live, and get them interested in building community. In fact, the last time that we chatted, James, we talked about your book, Come Community Unity. Did I say that right?
It's community. I
That's
know it's
it.
a tough one.
Community. We talked about that one, and it's all about building a network in a neighborhood in the community that you live in, and branching out from there. And it's an amazing concept. So I would encourage folks to check that out as well. James, you mentioned that the Christmas Hook, your latest book, and you can get that on Amazon. By the way, I think Jared showed. There you go. You can get that on Amazon. It's a easy read. It's a quick read. You can probably do it in a couple of hours, folks. But it's a very very engaging story, and it actually takes place. And James, I don't want to give too much away. I'll let you go in depth as much as you want to about this book, but uh, you actually talk about your own childhood experience and weave some stories in from your own childhood experience, don't you?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, just a heads up on this one. I think it's probably worth mentioning. We were talking about it before the show started, but back in May, I was having several different issues mentally. Nothing big, but just things that were growing inside of me. And I had a conversation with you, Mike. It was maybe a 2 hour long conversation. I don't know if you knew it, but I was sitting on a rock that was jutting out of these woods, looking over a highway down the street from my house. And one of the things that I was talking to you about was this idea that I was so wrapped up in Christmas I couldn't get my mind off of it, and I was thinking about writing this Christmas book, which is kind of way out of the realm of
Right.
what I do normally, but I have a lot of fond memories of Christmas. I grew up in the row homes of suburban Philadelphia, and it was a magical place to have Christmas. It was a hard place to have Christmas. I mean, it was an impoverished area for sure by every stretch, but it happened, and it happened every year. And after talking to you, and you answered several questions outside of the book. You also answered some very serious faith-based questions that I've kind of been on the fence with maybe for my whole life. And you started me down this path and a few other paths. And to be honest with you, the book flew out. It flew out, so like I said, with it from May till I really probably had it in an editor's hand around the end of August. And here we sit. It's out. It's as much as I can say it is about, it mirrors some things that happened in my life, right? Thanks to the bloodthirsty lawyers, I can't say that it was about my life, and I can't say that anybody in there resembles anyone else. And there's to cover my own tail. You know how that goes, right?
Yeah. 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 Well, you can't miss the fact. I mean, one of the main characters, if not the main character, is Jamie Walsh. So, I mean,
Yeah,
it's not a big leap to see who you're talking about there, James.
no doubt about it. Yeah, you just got to be real careful when you start
Yeah.
talking about other people. You know how that goes.
Yes, absolutely. So this story, folks, and I don't want to be a spoiler here, but this story, it's called The Christmas Hook, and it actually does bring it back to the real reason that we celebrate this holiday. And as soon as I say that, I know that there's some say, well, I don't celebrate Christmas. That's a pagan holiday, and that's this and that and the other thing. Listen, we have this opportunity, and this is the answer that I give all the time to folks that say, well, I don't celebrate Christmas and I don't do this because that's tap the brakes. What I encourage you to do is don't celebrate it then, but take the opportunity to be out in your communities, in your cities. Don't hole yourself up in your house. Don't pull the blinds down. Don't seclude yourself during this time. I'm just getting on my soapbox a little bit here, James.
It's a good message. Keep going.
Don't do that when you have an opportunity, when this secular pagan heathen culture that we live in, when you have an opportunity to talk about Jesus Christ and people are most open to hearing it, and then you want to withdraw because it's a pagan holiday. Give me a break already. What kind of a Christian testimony and witness is that? Now, I'm probably going to get some email, and that's fine. You can send it to Pastor Mike at cclohio.org. Pastor Mike at cclohio.org. You can email me, and I'll talk about it with you if you've got an issue with that. There's my public service announcement. James, it really is a book that brought back some fond memories for me. Now, I mentioned to you before we went on the air that I didn't grow up and have the American Christmas experience as a child, but I did as a parent. And so some of the things that you talked about, those traditions that we build into the fabric of our experience as a family, they are so rich and detailed. But what I appreciated about the book, James, is that you brought it back to the real reason, and it's that we celebrate our Messiah, our Savior, the Lord Jesus Christ, who came, God in the flesh, to this earth to redeem a fallen humanity. And for that, I applaud you. And I hope that wasn't a spoiler, James.
No, I don't think that was a spoiler at all. I mean, there's not really too much in this book that's gonna become. There's not too much that's gonna be really overwhelming when it comes to a plot twist. So I don't think there's a whole lot that you could spoil. As you read through the book, there's a little bit of I guess there's a little bit of sort of the mystical, but at the end of the day, it doesn't turn out as you would think. I was really trying to capture a few things here. I use the book a little bit as a mechanism to sort of comb through my own feelings about the holiday. Right? So no matter what you feel about the holiday, one thing's for certain: it's a massive American tradition. It's a massive piece of American culture. And anytime I have a chance to talk about an American culture that, in my opinion, is under attack more times than not. I mean, we've all been a part of conversations about just saying the word Merry Christmas, and what a what a problem that can be for some people. So I think I thought it was very important that we bring something like that to light today. I wanted to create a book and a story, Mike, that was a modern Christmas tale. You know, I don't think we have a lot of modern Christmas stories. We read a bunch of Christmas stories in my household. I have a whole, actually just to the right of me over here, a whole bookshelf full of books. And there's one specific section of that bookshelf, and it's filled with books that we only read during the holiday. And, you know, they're the classics. It's The Grinch. It's, you know, A Christmas Carol, all those great books. But I couldn't really put my finger on something that had come out recently that parents could read with kids. And I'd like to get your take on this, Mike, to be honest with you. There's some terrifying scenes in the book, and there's some very real interactions between 9-year-old kids, and there's some pretty heavy topics discussed in the book. In my opinion, I'd like to see parents read it with their children, maybe read it out loud, that type of thing, read it together, because I think there's some heavy topics in it that kids not only will need some help with, especially if they're youngsters, but I think it opens the door to conversations that we're just not having in the country anymore, because children are so busy with the running and the dashing and the, you know, the soccer and the baseball. Kids do too much, in my opinion. And then, you know, their free time, they usually get thrown into some kind of video game or into some kind of busy work so that parents can be what parents are today. And they're not what parents used to be. That's just the reality of it. I mean, look at me. It's 6:13 p.m. and I'm sitting up in a room in the dark talking to you instead of my kids. It's a sign of the times. But I'd love to get your take on sort of some of the more scary parts of the book, the children's interaction, and what do you think about that kind of stuff? Because everyone who I've talked to about this book, it always goes back to this for me. I talked to dads groups, I talked to moms groups, and I said, you know, I gave them books. I said, what do you think? Is this too scary? Is this too grown up? Is this too adult? Or is this something that you could read with your child and benefit from?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think it is something that you could read with your child and benefit from. And I think what you did was, and I think it was a wise move to introduce. I think his name was Crispy Jimbo. Was that accurate, Crispy Jimbo?
Crispy Jimbo, yeah.
Yep, yeah.
He's a fun time.
Yeah. Crispy Jimbo. Now, and folks are going to say, what? Crispy Jimbo? What kind of a name is that? Well, I'm not going to tell you why he insisted that he be called that by this group of kids. But the character, to me, James, when I read the book, the character Crispy Jimbo was an amalgamation of what parents should be. In other words, parents should be someone that their children can have a serious conversation with about those things that are of concern to them, without the parent trying to smooth it over or act like it's really not a big deal. For 9-year-olds, the problems that they wrestle with, and that was the age group that the three primary characters in your book, they were all, I think, the same age, 9 years old. The problems that they think they have, they're real to them, and they do have roots and basis in problems and situations and issues that even adults wrestle with. And one of them is fear. Kids experience real fear today. They lack confidence, and that may sound kind of strange to some people, because for from what we see in a good number of places, children seem to be very self-assured of themselves, almost borderline cocky in their capabilities. They've been puffed up and pumped up and this whole self-esteem thing for so long that sometimes it seems like they think they can never fail, and even when they do, they didn't. So my point is that I think it's important for parents to have this conversation with their children about the things that are of concern to them. Now, don't think, parents, and I'm not informing, listen, I'm not a child psychologist. I'm a father of 4 grown daughters. I'm a pastor. Years of counseling and giving advice and coming alongside and listening to people. That's my only resource, the Holy Spirit in me, the Word of God, and experience. So what I'm telling you is that we need to have these conversations with our children. If that's you, if you're watching, and by the way, let me say that parenting never stops. I'll tell you now that my baby is 30 years old, and my oldest daughter is, and I better get this right, my oldest daughter is 44 years old. So parenting never stops. Your children are always going to want to know and hear your opinion. They're going to seek advice from you. You need to be prepared as a parent. So, James, to answer, that's a long-winded response to your question. But I think what you did there in the book by having these children visit Crispy Jimbo and him give them some what I consider to be godly wisdom, because he's the one that tied in Jesus Christ. He's the one you wrote the story. He's wearing a cross that what he went through was the turning point in his own life. He has learned to face fears. He's learned to face disappointments. He's learned to face forks in the road and changes of plans and all of those things that children need to be prepared for. The parent is the one that needs to assist their child in those areas. What do you think of that response?
Oh, I love it. I love it. Like I said, it's when I got about halfway through writing this book, I knew I could go 2 ways. I could turn it into a real legitimate child's story that any kid could read in a child reading level, or I thought, I could make a good Christmas story, period. And I'm not a good limiter. I'm not really good at limiting myself particularly when I get on a path. So I'm glad, and it seems like thus far I made the right decision. Hearing it from you means a lot, though, I'll tell you that much. I would like to tell you a quick story about exactly what you were talking about with parenting and how important it is and how it never stops. Because when I hear stories about 44-year-old children, it makes me very happy, because I feel like my 7-year-old is growing up way too fast, and I feel like the guy's going to be gone before I know it. But if you don't mind, I'd like to take
Please.
10 minutes to tell you an incredible story about parenting and how it can affect your children much later on in life, because this is a personal story. In 2016, I got in a car accident, and it was my fault. And I wound up wrecking my car. My mother-in-law was suffering severely from cancer at the time, and we felt pretty sure that she was going to die. And it was those 2 things are going to work themselves together. They have nothing to do with each other right now. Insurance and mother-in-law getting sick and passing away a few months later, and all these things sort of culminated into me and my wife sitting around looking at each other going, we didn't really know what the next step was, because mom-in-law was also our babysitter. And at the time, I had been talking to my wife and talking to my job about, I think I'm going to work part-time and start writing for a living, because I had done some work for some clients. For those of you who don't know, and many of you might not know, I run a writing business, and I write freelance exclusively in the survival and preparedness market. That's how I pay the bills. But before I did that, I was working a regular 9 to 5, and we didn't know what we were going to do with the kids. We went and visited a few daycares, and I'm not a big daycare guy, man. I there's something really weird about leaving my kid with people I don't know very well.
Right.
And we talked, and I asked my wife, "Would you be interested in staying home?" And she's got a really good job, and she really didn't want to do it. And I said, "All right, well that's fine." I talked to my mother, and I have to be honest with you when you're listening, audience. My parents have struggles, man. They've got real legitimate struggles. I won't go into it in detail, but they're people who are fighting vices on a daily basis, to be honest with you. But they're still my parents, and they know me better than anyone.
Yes.
And, I talked to my mom, and I said, I don't want to put him in daycare. And she said, well, do you think you could stay at home and work and make enough money so that, you could pay the bills and all that? And I said, I don't know, Mom, I'm not a writer. You know what I mean? This is not what I do. My background is in food. I was at the time I was working for the local food bank as a food safety manager. I'd been a chef for many years. And my mother said, do it. She said, just do it. Just do it. Do it for your kids. Make it work. I know you can make it work. And 2 years later, the rest is history. You know what I mean? I did it. At the end of the day, I thought about it a lot. But the thing that pushed me over the edge, Mike, no lie, was my mother saying, do it. You can do it. You need to do it for your kids.
Yep.
And, I'm 30 years old at the time when she told me that. So it's real. The power of the parent post childhood is there, and it's strong.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you brought that up. That's my story.
Yeah. Amen. Yeah. Well, apparently somebody needed to hear that today, James, because you've confirmed and echoed exactly the point that I was trying to make, is that you're never done parenting. Although sometimes you wish you were, but that's a whole nother point. James, you mentioned something, and I really want to springboard off of that, for folks to follow up on their own. That you write and post in the preparedness and survival genre, and that really is a very interesting topic to a lot of folks. So let's go down that path just a little bit. What are some of the topics that you've most recently written about and explored and encouraged other people to do? Let's look at some of those topics, and then I want to go into community, some of those points that you made, because I think they're very, very important.
Yeah, sure. No problem. So obviously, writing in the while it seems like it would be almost like a micro niche to write in survival and preparedness exclusively, there's a lot to cover.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a lot to cover. You can talk about bushcraft and sort of the art of surviving in the woods, or using the woods themselves as a resource. You can talk about urban survival, how to survive in a city. You can get much more benign and talk about simple emergency preparedness at home. You can talk about preparedness from the standpoint of a more self-reliant and self-sufficient standpoint, where we're talking about, like urban homesteading or homesteading in general, where there's a much greater focus on growing food, raising livestock, food preservation, and really, really sustaining oneself through that type of a life. It's a really wide-ranging thing. Obviously, one of the things that I'm going to write about all the time is recent events. So wildfire talk has been big. I've been writing a lot about the importance of an evacuation plan and assuring that people have the ability to evacuate and evacuate efficiently. Because the stories that I've heard have been wild. They've been amazing. I heard a story about a guy who was evacuated at 2:30 in the morning with his family. When he stepped outside, the fire was coming down the hills. He saw someone's house, I guess their propane tank or something, exploded the moment he stepped outside with his family. And there was just no time to react. He just left. Everything he left behind, and that's it. And you know what? When it comes to evacuation, I'd much rather people do that. But there's a lot of steps you can take ahead of time to make sure that you evacuate efficiently. You take the things that you need to take. And, the biggest message, the biggest thing that I've come to realize in this, the way that I make my living, is that America needs to really focus, not all their time, but they need to focus a lot more on preparing for simple regional disasters that affect them on an annual basis. You know, we could go into a discussion about preparing for the end of times, the end of the world, you know, martial law, civil unrest. It seems like it's always, the possibility is always growing. But to be honest, if we really wanted to see a difference made in the nation in terms of disaster preparedness, it would come from people recognizing that if they live on the East Coast, they're going to get hit with hurricanes probably annually. So they should have everything they need to be prepared for that. They should have an evacuation plan in place for that. You know, so you could say similar things about the West Coast and all parts of the nation. Everybody knows. Well, you could look at the Northeast.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what happened to them just what is it, a week ago, right? They
Mm-hmm.
know they're going to get snow. They get snow every year. I grew up there. Every year we get snow. Every year when we get snow, people are at the market. They're going crazy. They're emptying the shelves. They're buying the snow shovel they should have bought at the end of winter the last year.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, this focus on regional disaster is something that I usually push. But as far as the topics that I cover, Michael, they can span, like I said, from you're the last man on the planet to you know, you're surviving a hurricane that just came through.
Yeah. Yeah. And here in Ohio, it'd be tornadoes.
There you
We're
go.
we're right in the
Well,
midst.
I'll tell you what, Mike. When it comes to tornadoes, I'm much more empathetic because when you know a hurricane's coming, you get about a week notice. When the wildfires start burning, you get a bigger notice. We don't have tornadoes mastered yet, so I can appreciate people in Tornado Alley not having the ability to hop into a car 2 days before a tornado hits and run off. You know what I mean? I can appreciate that. There are real struggles there in dealing with those things.
Yeah. Yeah, that's for sure. Because when they happen, and you get very, very, very little warning.
Yeah.
And of course, across Ohio, Indiana, this is sort of a tornado alley just north of where I live. And so we've got a very robust early warning system. And so we can, and those horns, those sirens that they set off, can be heard for miles. And there's a reason for that. Self reliance, growing your own food. Now, that's something that a lot of people talk about doing, but fewer actually do it. How important is that? If you've got a little property, listen, you may be in a subdivision, you've got a little tiny yard. You can still grow your own food, can't you, James?
Oh, sure, yeah. Anybody who wants to know, I'm going to throw a resource out real quick. Anybody who wants to know the upper limits of what's possible preparing in small spaces should check out a website run by a buddy of mine named Bernie. It's apartmentprepper.com. Very simple. Apartmentprepper.com. He, this is what he focuses on. What really is possible? Jared, right up there. Good work, man. Yeah, this is a great site, great new content all the time. But if you're really looking to get to the upper limits of what's possible in a small space, he does it. Now, that said, there's a ton of stuff you can do with a little more room. You know, I don't have a lot of space out in my backyard. I live on maybe a little over 3/4 of an acre, including where my house is. You know, not a lot of space in a lot of space in city terms, but not a lot of space for the average person who does the growing and the raising and that type of thing. And luckily enough, we have ordinances in place where I can have chickens out back. I've got plenty of room to expand gardening if I wanted to do that. To be honest with you, gardening is a struggle with 2 kids and a dog and 2 dogs running around out back. I've been experimenting for years just trying to figure out how to do that exactly the way I want to do it. But I've got a couple peach trees out back and, you know, raspberry bushes and that type of thing. It all fits in. It's so possible the more you focus in on it. And it's getting easier all the time because of technologies. I mean, you can talk about raising food indoors with grow lights and aquaponic technology where you grow your food right in water. I mean, you don't even have to bury it in the dirt outside. There's a lot of opportunity to grow food. And as far as I can tell, the way it plays into a healthy lifestyle and a quality of life, it just seems like growing and raising as much of your food, or at least knowing as much as you can about your food, it's a crucial part of life, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah. In your book, James, Community, Community, I was really struck by the emphasis that you made on the need for us to communicate with our neighbors, those that live in our neighborhood, not just those that live maybe across the street or right next door to us, but the larger community. Now, the reason that I was impressed by that uh, principle that you kind of fleshed out and built on is that that's exactly what we should be doing as believers in the Lord Jesus Christ. That we should be engaging not just those that live next door to us or across the street, but the larger community. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to purposely and with purpose, purposeful, start engaging your neighbors in common activities. You wrote a lot about that in Community, Community, the intentional engagement of your community in common activities actually builds the community and the ability of the community to respond together to emergency situations. Would you like to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. I'll preface it with this, because I preface the book in this way too, and whenever I talk about the book, I think it's worth mentioning. If you live in a run-of-the-mill suburban community, you have all the power in the world to turn it into a full functioning, like, machine where people communicate and can solve problems together and can build on that. We'll talk about what building on that means, but it's a lot of work. There's no getting around it. At the beginning of the book, if you buy the book, you open the first page, second page, whatever it is, you'll see there's a warning in there. The warning says, I'm going to tell you how to do this. Once you know how to do this, you're not going to unknow how to do this, but you're going to know that you're not doing it if you don't do it. And it takes a lot of work to do. So you can live really guilty for the rest of your life if you read my book and don't do what I tell you to do in it, because it's the only way we're going to survive the next 100 years, in my opinion, is that if we make that connection again. Because the only thing that's happening everywhere you look, the only thing that's happening is people are being divided. And I don't think it's as divisive as we think. I think that it's because of the fact that we are so isolated now.
Yeah.
I think it's because of the fact that and it's so strange, but we are afraid to have real conversation with one another.
Yeah.
We're afraid to really sit down and talk. I think it all stems from the fact that we're not even that afraid to get mad at someone or have someone get mad at us. I think we're afraid to fix the problem when one occurs, because it seems like we dance around anything that could really, raise hairs. But at the end of the day, those are the conversations that make a difference. So honestly, in the book, in Community, I decided to take the inroads by doing something as benign as starting a community garden.
Yeah.
And the whole goal in that was, okay, let's think about what's the one thing that no one can say no to. You've really got to be a special kind of person if your community comes to you, or if several people in your community come to you and say, hey, we want to start a community garden. What do you think about that? You on board? You in or you are out? You know what I mean? And I think for 99% of people that you're going to run into, they're going to say, yeah, let's do it. Why not? What's so bad about that? And that's how you really have to get the ball rolling. You've got to either do that, or you've got to find something where people can jump into it. They have something to talk about, and you can start having conversations between neighbors again.
Yes.
That's step number one, and it's a very important one. It's not an easy one. There's nothing easy that's going to come of this book. I can tell you that right now. But I have to be honest with you. That's what it is.
Yeah. So the importance of doing, and I particularly like that strategy, James, that you mentioned about canvassing your neighborhood, your community, to see, listen, Can we start a community garden? Can we start a community, a plot of ground? Can we find someone to maybe even let us do it on a vacant lot or something like that? There's a greater thing at play here by doing that, and it's really building some cohesiveness within the community in which you live. Now, it's no secret to those of us who are paying attention that the food system, the food supply system, the food chain in America is becoming increasingly centralized. And I could even, I don't think it's a stretch to use this word, James, corporatized. We now have corporate farms, whether it's grain farms or whether it's poultry farms or whether it's hog farms. Large corporations and companies are gobbling up the food chain, if you will. And I think it's very important for Americans to understand that and start moving back away and becoming a little bit more self-reliant or self-sufficient. And you've already answered the objection to someone who would say, well, I live in the city. Well, there's methods and ways that you can grow food even there. And listen, start small, but engage your neighbors and engage those in the greater community around you. And what you're going to find happening is you're going to draw people out of isolation. You talked about that. I think one of the driving forces behind this really I think it's demonic, personally. Dividing people, putting them in isolation. One of the driving forces, one of the tools that's being used today to isolate people is technology. And how ironic is that, James, that with technology that can connect us to people all over the world, people that we otherwise would never have a connection with, it's really just kind of a mirage. It's not really, I mean, seriously, somebody has 5,000 friends on Facebook. How many of them do you really know? Maybe 100 if you're lucky. So technology, I think, is being used as a wedge to isolate us. And listen, the thought that comes to mind, divide and conquer, divide and conquer. And I think technology is being used that way. What are your thoughts?
I'll be honest. I think that we haven't figured it out yet. I really think that's what it is. I think it's like probably like most technologies throughout history, where something comes along that absolutely rocks the world. Probably the same way radio did, probably pretty similar to how television did, both before my time. But we don't. We have such tremendous power now. Everyone who has access to this thing. I mean, right now I'm looking at my phone, which is basically better than any computer I ever had growing up. And I'm talking to you, who is how many states away?
Yep.
It's magic, really. It's too much for us to deal with. I was listening to Jordan Peterson the other day, and he was talking about how the big problem with technology is that our morality is not keeping up with the power that we have. And I think that's pretty profound. I think that
Mm-hmm.
that's pretty close to right? So we went from dial tone and landline. That was the extent of our network outside of meeting people in person, right? We could talk to these people through the landline if we had their telephone number, to this incredible jump to where we can affect probably millions of people with tweets and texts and posts and the whole 9 yards. And ultimately, I think we'll figure out how to sort of blend the two, and I think we'll do a good job with this technology thing. But right now, I just think we're like sort of like my 3-year-old when he gets control of the TV remote. I think it's impossible for us to understand how to best use it. Why should we be using it? What should we be doing with it? And all those big, enormous questions. And one of the biggest struggles is everybody has it. So the best people have it, and they do incredible things with it, right? There's no denying that. Mid-range people have it, and they do the things that they do with it. And then terrible, miserable, horrible people have it also, and they
Yeah.
do their work as well, and it's just, unfortunately, those terrible, miserable, horrible people make good news, so they're usually the ones that get the spotlight.
Yeah. Yeah. Very true. Well, I'd like to offer an opportunity for anybody in the queue, or if you're watching online, this is being broadcast live on YouTube and Facebook on a number of different pages on Facebook. If you have a question that you would like to ask James, then please ask that now. If you're in the queue, you need to unmute your mic, and you should know how to do that by now. Just unmute your mic, and you can ask James a question. If you're on one of those other social media platforms and you're watching, you're going to need to type in that question. And I believe we have somebody that's monitoring that, and they'll be able to pass that question along. So, any questions for James in the queue? Jared, I remembered to take a moment to let questions be asked. Anybody? Need to unmute if you do.
So James, what got you into why do you do what you do?
Which part? The prepping and the writing type of thing?
Yeah, do you prep type of thing? Like why do you do it? Yeah, why do you write about prepping?
Sure, yeah. It's an incredible question, actually. I was railroaded by a hurricane myself back in 2011, and I was woefully unprepared. That's half the story. The other half is a lot more strange and almost otherworldly. So as that was happening, we recovered, no big deal, nothing really to speak of that was bad that happened to our house or our family. But mentally, I took a severe blow, A, to my ego, and B, I guess to the part of me that has always been very responsible. I realized that not being prepared for things like this and living the lifestyle that I was living as a father and a husband, I was very unprepared, and it was an embarrassing time for me, no doubt. But the man who lived in the house was receiving these magazines. You might be familiar with them. They're called Cheaper Than Dirt. And the majority of them of the magazine is like firearms parts and pieces, and then there's some tactical gear, and in the back there's some very real disaster preparedness gear that's for sale. And that kind of piqued my interest all of a sudden after being hit with this thing. And to make matters even more strange than that, these magazines coming in out of nowhere, I'd send them back. They'd still send me a new one the next month. I find this chest underneath the house, this like metal bin, really the perfect thing to use to make a Faraday cage, but it's filled with all sorts of things that are related to this sort of preparedness journey. And I'll never forget opening that thing and going, what is going on here? And the sort of the fiction writer part of me looks at a situation like that and says, I don't know if you guys ever read the story that Bram Stoker wrote about the mummy, but you basically open up, if I remember it correctly, you either wear the necklace or you open up the tomb and you basically take the spirit of that mummy on. And it reminded me of that. It reminded me of that in a very big way. That something sort of came over me when I moved into this house. Like I almost got some of Dan's spirit in me. And from then on, I started broadcasting just as a nobody, know nothing, to try and figure out more. And before I knew it, man, I was 5 years into this thing, and I said, I guess I can write about it. I talk about it every week, and then I started writing, and some people paid me to write. That was pretty surprising. And before long, I just, started making more connections through the podcast. People need work done. I'll do the work. And yeah, the rest is, what it is. It's not an easy way to make a living, I'll tell you that, but it's for me, for a guy like me, for a person who I guess I was born to be a writer and been dancing around it for a while. It's been a blessing.
Awesome. Any other questions? Anybody in the queue?
Yeah, I've got a lot of ammunition, guys. Podcasting, small business, disaster preparedness, writing, jumping careers. I'm definitely going to get to the point, Mike, where I'm going to have to put some kind of micro niche freelance writing course together for people, because I don't think people understand that they can have a passion and they can have a podcast and a blog and make a living writing about it. It's not easy, but it's doable for, I think, anybody out there. It really is.
Yeah. Well, and perhaps that'll encourage someone to take you up on that. They can connect, folks. You can connect with James if you go to the website IamLibertyShow.com. You'll notice there's a newsletter tab there at the top right. You can click on that newsletter tab, and then you can sign up for James's newsletter. It says it's a bi-monthly newsletter, and he's always writing about things that's on his mind at the time. So if you want to connect questions, I'm sure that they could email you. Where would they email you, James? Can they do it through this newsletter contact form, or is there a
contact form will come to me? I'll make it also real easy on your audience. IamLibertyShow@gmail.com is another email address if you want to get me, and you can always get me live Wednesday nights at Prepper Broadcasting. Call into the show and you'll talk directly to me.
No, there you have it. So folks, if you want to participate in that, and James is always talking about some very interesting things, very helpful things on the live podcast there on the Prepper Broadcast Network. You want to check that out on Wednesdays. And as a matter of fact, let me give a shameless plug to James for Soaring Eagle Radio, because G-Man is good enough to put to air Soaring Eagle Radio on the Prepper Broadcasting Network. That is Mondays. And these are Pacific Standard Times, I think. Mondays from 2 to 3 and 11 p.m. to midnight. So he airs it twice on Mondays. So let's see, it's a great network, a lot of good shows. James, you've been on there for a few years now, haven't you?
I think I've got something like 400 episodes logged on that. I don't miss very often. And yeah, you go onto that website that you're highlighting there, and you click if you click live shows, and then you'll get a list of folks' shows there. And if you scroll down and click I Am Liberty, you'll be able to see just past it. There's a list of all the shows that I've ever done under that I Am Liberty tab. So, I mean, you could go back and listen all the way back to my first live show, which I did with a telephone up to my ear because I didn't have any of the gear yet to do this thing properly. But yeah, it's been one heck of a ride, man. I'm really glad I did what I did.
Oh, there was a picture of Stephen Minking. Now you've been on The Objective before, and you're having Stephen join you on an upcoming show too, you said.
Actually, that was the show description for last week's episode, still up. And last week we had Stephen Menking on, and we did 2 hours on the topic of spiritual survival.
There it is.
Because the theme this month is all about holiday survival, basically. Because
that probably resonates with some people.
We can have a lot of fun with that and laugh about it. We also can get real serious. And what we're going to talk about Wednesday night is home security during the holidays, because it's a good time for people to break in and steal the stuff you've purchased with your hard-earned money.
Well, that's a very good point. So let's talk about that a little bit. Let's follow that line. That's a very, very good point. Home security. What are some things that people really they should have these in place already? But if they don't, what would be a good place to start?
I'm going to give you, rather than give you a list of things to buy or do, I'm going to give you a theory that I think helps people understand home security better, because I think it's more helpful personally. So the way I always think about home security is a set of concentric circles, okay, where the smallest circle is your bedroom and your children's bedroom, right? That's within the house. The next largest circle might be like your doors and your windows and the locks that keep those doors and windows shut. All right, and then maybe another concentric circle would be your porch, your front and back porch. Are there lights there? Are there cameras there? Something to that effect. Then, of course, another concentric circle goes out to your yard and even out to your street. And I think what you want to think about when you're managing home security is, what do those concentric circles look like to someone looking in, and what type of action can you take to reinforce those areas? Because one of the things I like to talk about in terms of home security is, your task is only to make your home, and this might sound a little selfish, but if everybody did it, it would make a big difference. So I don't want you to take it any kind of a terrible way. But when you're thinking about home security, you're basically wanting to make your house look less appealing than the other two houses next to an attacker, to a burglar, right? So you want them to look at your house and say, well, there's a whole lot of light coming off of that front porch, and it's a pretty clear path leading up to it. Someone is likely to see me go up to that front door and try to jimmy it, try to get in. So maybe I don't do this house. Maybe I go to the next one. That's really sort of your overarching goal. But you can manage that goal with that concentric circle idea. So think about how your house looks from street level. What things does your house have that present it as something where someone's going to say, I don't want to do that. I don't want to go there. Something as simple as having a car parked in the parking lot, right? Very simple. Somebody has a car parked in their driveway. Obviously, if there's a house next to you that has no cars parked in the driveway, then they know no one's home. It's a big deal. Having a clear and lit path to your front door is huge. The last thing someone wants to do who's committing a crime is be identified. If they go up to a camera, through a very bright light, they're easy to identify, that type of thing.
Yeah.
One of the most important concentric circles, though, to discuss has to be that one within your house, that smallest concentric circle. So if you get to the point where someone's made it through the street level, they've made it to the front door, and now they've gone as far as to decide that they're going to come into the front door and go up the steps into the bedrooms, you've got to have a plan for that. I'm not going to tell you, and I couldn't tell you what to do, because I'm sure I'd get in some sort of legal trouble, but you got to have a plan for that. It's a very rare thing. In most cases, people are going to break in your house if they want to steal your things. If someone breaks into your house and comes upstairs, it's a big deal. That's a whole new level of crime that's looking to be committed when someone starts coming up those stairs or trying to break into those bedrooms. So, think about it as a concentric sort of layout where you can build defense on each of those concentric circles and sort of bolster your home security in that way. And always remember, at the end of the day, you're just trying to make your house a little less desirable than the house around you to a criminal.
Yeah. Good advice. Now, James Ray, one of the guys in the huddle with us, has suggested security cameras. And I think that's a good idea, and the cost of a good security camera system has really come down over the years, hasn't it?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, just for the record, I worked security for a little bit, but I'm not a security expert. But what I will tell you is, the key word in home security is deterrence. As valuable, even as good as high quality cameras are today, and as affordable, you come up there with your shirt pulled up over your face and a hood on, and it doesn't matter what you're recording them with, you're not going to be able to make them out. But it's a powerful deterrent. And again, when you talk about making your house less desirable than others, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for things that deter people. You're looking for multiple locks on doors. Okay, I can't break into this place easily. You're looking for locks on windows. I can't just walk in. I can't just lift this. Dogs are one of the most incredible deterrents, even little dogs. It's the noise. It's the idea that, somebody's going to know what's going on now. It's not a quiet house with an open window that I can just go sneak into and do what I need to do and get out. So security cameras, sure, definitely. I look at those as kind of a deterrent, and deterrents are big in home security.
Yeah. Good point, Ray. Thanks for bringing that up. Any other questions from anybody that's in the queue today that they'd like to ask James? We're getting real close to running out of time here for this episode, but we do want to give you an opportunity if you have something that you would like to ask James. Any other questions?
Yeah, James, where's your book available at?
So all of the books that I've written are available at Amazon.com. You can search the James Walton author page if you want to see like the whole collection of them all. There it is right there up on the screen. Community is the one that we were talking about earlier with the various community-based topics and community building. And the book that's just fresh off the press is The Christmas Hook, The Christmas Story, is also available at Amazon. Again, if I could say one special thing about The Christmas Hook, as we close in on December, I didn't do this by design, but the book has 25 chapters. Just happened to have 25 chapters. So one of the things that a lot of people are talking about is I'm going to read a chapter a night with my kids, and I might even be reading a chapter a night with a fellow author as well, just to sort of play with that idea.
Perfect. Yeah, that's another one of those divine coincidences, James.
You put it perfectly. I could do a whole hour on divine coincidences in my life, to be honest.
That's right. Yep. Well, James, I appreciate you joining me today. Folks, you can go to IamLibertyShow.com. Join James on his live podcast every Wednesday. And again, the time was, James?
We are live 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every Wednesday.
And there is functionality there, folks. If you want to join just like you do here in the queue, if you want, there's a chat room and you can ask questions and talk with James. Very interesting content always there. There at the website that Jared is showing right now, you can subscribe to James's newsletter, bi-monthly newsletter, and that gets emailed, I believe, James.
That's right. Yeah, that'll come to you direct from the website. All kinds of deals. I'm doing giveaways all the time. I've got great companies that work with me, and I've got a ton of stuff to give away, to be honest. And we do that through the newsletter currently.
Well, there you go. If you're interested in self-reliance, survival, preparedness, and listen, we're not talking apocalyptic, end of the world kind of things here. James is much more focused on more practical details about emergency preparedness. What are you going to do if the power goes out for an extended period of time? That's a real issue. What are you going to do if there's a natural disaster in your area and all of the shelves in the grocery store are empty? You need to have some basic supplies and preparedness items already back so that you can shelter in place. That's the message that I would encourage people. So James, thank you for joining me today, and we'll do this again real soon. I always appreciate chatting with you and consider you a friend, my brother.
Oh, Mike, I appreciate it. It's been great. Like I said, I'm forever indebted for the guidance that you've given me up to this date. You're a person in my life to whom there are very few that can do what you do for me, and I appreciate that. So thank you.
Well, thank you. God bless you, James. Jared, before we sign off, let's make sure people remember David Heavener coming up at 8 o'clock tonight. David Heavener live, 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. And I know that'll be streamed live on Facebook. Jared, any place else that's going out live?
Yeah, he'll be on his Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter channel. I'm not sure it's plugged into his website yet. I'm not involved on that side of the house.
Okay.
But yeah, his YouTube channel, I think it's David Heavener. If you just search David Heavener, you'll be able to find it.
DavidHeavener.tv. Yep. Or you'd go on Facebook and look up David Heavener or Last Evangelist. It'll be there. 8 o'clock tonight, folks. Join David Heavener live. God bless y'all. I appreciate you joining me. James, God bless you. We'll talk again soon.
You
Next
too,
Monday.
sir. Thanks again.
Thank you. Remember, folks, renewing our mind is not an option.